Up though, let's talk to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Tory candidate, of course, Rishi Sunak. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. We've just been talking with my guests in the studio. It has been the worst start ever to a Conservative election campaign, hasn't it?
Well, what you're going to see today is a very clear choice between responsible economic management from the Chancellor, Sajid Javid, versus the fantasy economics that we're hearing from the Labour Party. And ultimately, I think people need to take away from today, you need a strong economy to pay for the public services that we all rely on and value. And if you have this just completely profligate borrowing and spending, what that means is ordinary people are going to pay the price in higher taxes, fewer jobs, and no money to invest in public services. And that contrast today, I think, will be very clear.
And this is going to be a speech a little bit later today by the Chancellor, Sajid Javid. He's speaking, I think, at 10 o'clock this morning. Are you going to be laying out a lot of those plans? Big issues over the Chancellor. He's apparently rather at war, is he not, with the Cabinet Secretary over the failure to publish all of these costings already carried out by Treasury officials of Labour spending pledges?
Well, it's been a long-established precedent that the Treasury would do costings, official costings, properly, as you would expect, of opposition policies. I think that's more important now than ever before. We're hearing not just tens of billions, but hundreds of billions of pounds in unfunded spending and commitments from the Labour Party. I mean, it's reckless, it's extreme, it's on a scale that other people have said is absolutely unprecedented. And we all know what happens when you do that. You end up with higher taxes for ordinary people, you end up with the economy that gets wrecked, jobs dry up, and ultimately we need that strong economy to fund public services. That's what it's about. You need both things. You need a dynamic economy to generate the wealth to pay for the public services that we rely on. That's something that we're absolutely committed to doing, responsible economic management that delivers that, in contrast to the Labour Party. As I said, you're hearing from John McDonnell today. It's reckless and it's extreme, and ultimately ordinary taxpayers would pay the price.
Well, the Financial Times are reporting Labour's vow, they say, to take borrowing to £400 billion over 5 years. So, apologies, over a decade in terms of the spending battle. Last time round, it was, I suppose, a choice between austerity, with the Tories continuing, balancing the books, responsible finance, all of that was played out during the election, which didn't necessarily play that well, and the Labour Party saying they're turning the spending taps on. Now, the Labour Party pledges have pretty much doubled in cost in terms of borrowing. And the Tory party's pledges are now up to the level at 2017. You guys were saying that Labour pledges at the time in 2017 were irresponsible. You were talking about magic money trees. So where's your magic money tree grown from?
No, you will see today an approach to economic management that is incredibly responsible. That's what people rightly should expect from us. That's what the Chancellor will set out. It's not fantasy economics that we're hearing from the Labour Party. And just judge us on our record. We now, last year, the last official numbers that we have, got borrowing as a percentage of GDP down to its lowest level in almost 20 years. After inheriting a £150 billion borrowing target, we were borrowing £1 in every 4 that we spent. That was a disaster. It's taken a lot of hard work to get to the position that we're now in. A strong place to reinvest in public services like the NHS, like schools, like policing, but do it responsibly and ensure that we always have control of the public finances. We don't want things to spiral out of control, and that's what we're hearing from the other side. It's a very clear choice.
Well, let's also talk about, say, what's been going on in terms of the disaster of the election. We had a very successful launch from Boris Johnson last night. This came after, again, queries, over the doctoring of a Keir Starmer video, accusations from Dominic Grieve, former Tory MP, that the government is sitting on his report into Russian interference into the 2017 election and the 2016 referendum. We had a row over Jacob Rees-Mogg having to apologise for claiming to have insulted Grenfell survivors. And not least the Cabinet Minister, the Welsh Secretary, Alan Cairns, resigning. Absolutely unprecedented for a governing party going into an election to lose a Cabinet Minister. I mean, as I say, one of the worst starts ever to an election campaign. Are we sure that there are going to be any more gaffes to come?
Well, look, I think it's absolutely right that Alan has resigned from his cabinet position so that he can cooperate with the Cabinet Office investigation. It's the right thing to do. It's a very sensitive matter. But beyond individual personalities, there's a clear choice at this election and an agenda that people should be engaging with. And I think we heard that at the Prime Minister's launch yesterday. We need to end this delay, provide people with certainty. If they get a Conservative majority government, if people vote for that, we can get Brexit done in a matter of weeks. We can move on to the priorities like the NHS, schools and policing that people want to have us focus on. The alternative to that with anybody else is more delay, more indecision, going round in circles, talking about Brexit. 2020 will be spent not with one, but two more referendums. Nobody wants that for Britain. We can have a great year in 2020, get Brexit done, focus on all these other things, get the economy really humming, and a vote for anyone else will not let us get to that place. And that's the message that came loud and clear through the Prime Minister's speech yesterday evening.
Coming back to Alan Cairns, though, should he still be running as a Tory candidate to be an MP?
Well, look, this is a very sensitive matter. It's difficult for me to comment beyond that. Obviously, the Welsh Conservatives are looking into the processes that have happened.
Jeremy Corbyn has questioned his moral right to stand as an MP.
Well, so, Alan has, as he said in his letter to the Prime Minister, rightly resigned from his cabinet position so that he can cooperate fully with the Cabinet Office investigation into what's happened. And I think it's right that we let that take its course, not prejudge any outcomes. And so given the sensitivity of the situation, it's difficult for me to say anything further on it.
Just finally, I must ask you about the decision of Tom Watson to resign, though. Obviously, it rather overshadowed the end of the Prime Minister's launch last night, which, yes, I think most people would have agreed was a very successful launch. But I just wonder what you make of Tom Watson's decision.
Well, obviously, I'm not, people have got plenty to say about it, and the internal wranglings in the Labour Party are not something that, to be honest, I or the party have massively focused on. We've got, I think, a very positive message that we're trying to take out to the British people about ending this delay and uncertainty, getting Brexit over the line in a matter of weeks after being elected, focusing on a positive agenda about levelling up across the country with investments in infrastructure, investing in our schools and our hospitals and policing. That's what we want to talk about. That's our agenda for the country, and I think it's resonating with people when we're out and about.
Can I just also ask you, just finally, sorry to keep you too long, but the former Labour MP Ian Austin has just revealed that he's not going to run in his Dudley seat again. He, of course, left the Labour Party over anti-Semitism issues. He has said that he's now going to tell, in his words, decent, traditional, patriotic Labour voters that they should vote for Boris Johnson in this election. Your reaction to that?
Well, I very much welcome the support, and we're seeing that not just from MPs who have left the Labour Party over anti-Semitism and the approach that Labour's taken on a range of issues. I'm seeing it when I talk to voters across the north as well, near where I am. They feel that today's Labour Party doesn't represent the needs of ordinary working families. And when you mentioned patriotism, we had this extraordinary situation the other day where former Labour foreign secretaries, admirals, first sea lords, defence secretaries, Labour people are questioning that Jeremy Corbyn would be right for this country's national security. So people who care about patriotism, I think that's cutting through to them, and they're very worried about the prospect of what a Labour government would mean. And I hope that they find that our agenda on levelling up across the north, for example, investing in their priorities in public services is something that they welcome and can support.
Mayor of Greater Manchester, Labour's Andy Burnham, who joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
I must ask you about the breaking news in the last few moments, the news that Ian Austin, former Labour MP, of course, who left the party to stand as an independent over his concerns about anti-Semitism in the party and the failure of Jeremy Corbyn, he said to tackle it. He has just announced in the last few minutes he's not going to be standing at the general election as an independent or Labour, and he has told voters to vote backed Boris Johnson. He said, it's really come to something when I tell decent patriotic Labour voters that they should be voting for Boris Johnson at the election. And he says that Jeremy Corbyn is unfit to be Prime Minister. Do you agree with any of that?
No, not a word, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know what's behind that. I think Ian has been on a bit of a journey away from Labour, not just recently, over a number of years, to be honest, Julia. So, no, I don't know really what lies behind it.
Well, you do know what lies behind it. He was adopted by Jewish parents, and he's very concerned about anti-Semitism in the party. He believes that Jeremy Corbyn, he's spoken many times in the House of Commons, is unfit for public office.
No, I understand that fully, but I was meaning more what encourages somebody who was a Labour MP to say vote Conservative. I don't understand that part of it, to be honest. But no, of course I understand his concerns about anti-Semitism. And I've been on your show before, Julie, I think, saying that the the party should have dealt with them much better than they did. But as to say, vote Conservative in the West Midlands or the North, where people are really struggling and have been hit hard by the austerity that we've seen, and I don't understand that part of it, to be honest.
OK, well, let's also talk about the big news in the last 12 hours or so, and that is the news that Tom Watson, the deputy leader of your party, has stood down. He's not going to be standing as a candidate, stood down as a deputy leader. He says that he will be campaigning for the Labour Party to win the general election. However, he, in his letter to Jeremy Corbyn, your party leader, he didn't wish him luck. He didn't sort of say, look forward to you being Prime Minister, all the things that one perhaps might have expected a deputy leader to say. No love lost between those two men. How significant is Tom Watson's decision to stand down?
Oh, certainly significant. A big loss to Labour. There's no doubt about that, Julia. Tom is a big figure, a formidable force when it comes to campaigning. So there'd be no point me coming on saying, "Oh, it's all fine." And Tom is a loss. There's no question. And obviously, in the same way that John Prescott brought some balance to the leadership in the Blair era, I think Tom has been a voice for people across the party in this one. So
is it a game changer in the sense that this is now the end of the battle between the Corbynistas and the so-called moderates in the party, of which you were very much on that side? You chose to leave Westminster to run for Mayor of Greater Manchester. Tom Watson was one of those moderates who, brown out rather than a Blairite, but who was urging other moderates, other non-Corbynistas at least, to stay and fight in the party. He said to the independents, people like Ian Austin, they shouldn't leave the party, they should stay and fight their ground. Doesn't this show that actually he's given up? That battle is now lost. Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell and others now have complete control of the Labour Party.
Well, to be honest, no, I don't see it quite like that because, in many ways we don't need a constant battle. We need all views represented, but, a constant battle is not what Labour needs when it comes to, the top of the party. And, no one's indispensable, to be honest. You think maybe you are when you're in Westminster, but you're not. And life moves quickly on. And there are many people around who, come perhaps more from Tom's side of the party that are still involved at the top of Labour politics. So he's definitely a loss, no doubt about it. A good friend of mine, but I understand probably that there are more personal reasons behind this than political.
Yes, I mean, that massive weight loss and getting healthier. And he says he's writing a diet book and campaigning on issues like that. But has he also he's been quite tarnished by this the VIP paedophile ring and his proportion of claims by Carl Beach, which were then at a time known by many to be false. And perhaps he now knows that with the attempts to abolish his deputy role, his chances of ever being leader of the Labour Party, his ambitions are over, aren't they?
I mean, if you're in Westminster for as long as Tom has been, and I was, there are challenging issues, aren't there? There are things that go for you. There are sometimes misjudgments that are made. It's all in a political career, isn't it? You do your best at the time, and you stand accountable for what you did and what you didn't do, or what you got wrong. I think overall Tom has been, as I say, a formidable campaigning force on issues like public health and sugar. We've just been hearing about that, but also gambling on the high street. He was one of the first voices to come out and say change was needed in that area. Obviously, around the whole issue of the responsibility of the press and the failure.
Well, he wanted to end a free press in this country to all intents and purposes. I mean, there are two different ways of looking at that one.
Well, possibly, but as I say, politics is about judgments, isn't it? In the end, people have to make judgments, stand by them, and Tom certainly did that. He's lost the British politics at the front line, Julia, definitely, because as I say, a big character. But none of us, as I say, are indispensable. There's a generation of talent coming through, and I'm sure they'll pick up the reins in this campaign.
I have to say, extraordinary 24 hours for the Conservative Party, probably one of the worst 24-hour starts to an election campaign. And everyone was talking about all of that heading into Boris Johnson's big launch last night. And then the Labour Party said, hold my beer. First of all, we had the resignation of Tom Watson, and then this morning we had Ian Austin. We're going to be speaking to him in just a few minutes. Former Labour MP, of course, he was a former aide to Gordon Brown when you were Director of Communications for Tony Blair in Number 10. He has said that he thinks that Labour voters should vote for Boris Johnson at this election. This has been a devastating start for the Labour Party as well, hasn't it?
Well, you and I have talked about this before. I've always thought that this election is the worst possible way to resolve the Brexit crisis. I think elections, when they're called by reasons which the person calling them is being fundamentally dishonest about them, which Johnson is, and was indeed dishonest yesterday when he stood outside Downing Street and said he didn't want this election. He's been desperate for this election because he's absolutely convinced there's no way that he can lose to Jeremy Corbyn. And meanwhile, the public have a habit, and Theresa May discovered this, that when they're told what an election is about, they sometimes think no.
No, absolutely, they do.
And then when you have both the main parties kicking off in a way that says to the public, this lot aren't really hanging together, or this lot aren't very competent, then it can go any which way. Now, I agree with Sue when she says I think a lot of people I think of all the things that have happened in the last few days. Yes, Tom Watson, people are aware of him, and although you'd be amazed how few people in politics are household names these days, Julia. It's extraordinary. But I'll tell you what, I think the only thing that's cut through in recent days, really, was Jacob Rees-Mogg talking about Grenfell.
Yeah, and indeed, of course, again, that may well have carried on in the news, apart from the fact that, of course, we had the Welsh Secretary, Alan Kearns, resign. Again, not a household name for most, let's be honest. But also, we had the big Boris Johnson launch. But again, Tom Watson resigning there is no question at all. The deputy leader of this party, he has been battling with Jeremy Corbyn. He's been over the anti-Semitism issue and over the launch, the move to the left under the Corbynistas. He has told numerous independent MPs now who've left the Labour Party, don't leave, stay and fight. And now he's giving up the fight and he's leaving. Undoubtedly, there was a quite pleasant letter exchange between him and Jeremy Corbyn, but there was no point although Tom Watson made it clear he's going to be campaigning for Labour, at no point was he talking about looking forward to Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister. Let's face it, the deputy leaders of parties don't resign at the beginning of a general election if they think they're going to win the general election, do they? What does that tell us about Labour Party prospects?
Well, I think, look, I'm not pretending that it's a great thing for the Labour Party. Of course it's not. And I think that a lot of moderate MPs, or some of the moderate MPs who've been persuaded by Tom to stay and fight, will probably be feeling, well, hold on a minute, you were the leader of the sort of stay and fight for moderate Labour Party, and now you're sort of throwing the towel in, as it were, may feel disappointed. But the other thing I'd say, Julia, is that don't underestimate for a lot of these MPs, particularly in the kind of environment that we have in politics now, just how personal and how big a personal decision it is to say, I've got friends that I've been talking to, should I do it again? Should I carry on? What's the point? And that becomes a very, very big personal thing. And I think if you're high profile in politics, it's sometimes very, very hard to separate that out from this sort of discussion where we all sort of talk about their motivations, talk about the implications. So I don't know whether Tom, you just have to look at him physically to realise that he's been on quite a sort of journey in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, he's made a big deal. He was very unhealthy, had type 2 diabetes, he lost 7 stone.
And I think a lot of this may be personal as well as political.
And he did say that. However, look, he has been very much tarnished by the VIP paedophile ring and his support for Carl Beach long after he'd been told. We know that this was a man who was very questionable, and he was still pushing and used his parliamentary privilege to say things about some people on their deathbeds, which can't ever be taken back. That has very much tarnished him. He's no longer seen as someone who's credible, perhaps as a future party leader. There's a lot of this about personal ambition. He realises that Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters within the Labour Party, they have now taken over the Labour Party. They are not going. The moderates, such as John Watson, is a moderate, not Keane Brown out. They're not going to get the party back. In which case, he's basically giving up the fight. Have the Blairites, the Brownites, the so-called moderates, have you lost the party to Jeremy Corbyn now?
Well, in that, look, Jeremy Corbyn is indisputably the leader of the Labour Party, and those who are closer to his sort of politics are very much in control of the the party machine. And you saw that, for example, yesterday. And there's an old friend and neighbour of mine in North London who's just been democratically selected as the local candidate in Bassett Law, and the Corbynistas have decided they don't like her, and they're trying to get rid of her right now. That is a fact, and this has always been the battle. It was the battle when we had the militant take over the Labour Party. Is do you stay and fight, or do you move on? And these are, as I say, very, very personal decisions. I'm in this extraordinary position where I'm sort of still fighting, but I'm not even in the Labour Party. But I think that for an MP, I don't think Tom thought he was going to be leader of the Labour Party. I think he was the leader of a group of Labour MPs, some of whom I think will be feeling a bit disillusioned and let down today, because they have maybe committed themselves to another 5 years, assuming they're in, reasonably safe seats. But I think that on the broader question about whether Jeremy Corbyn's in charge of the Labour Party, his brand of politics is in charge of the Labour Party. There's no doubt about that. Now, what happens after an election if Jeremy Corbyn were to win? That's one outcome. If there's to be a hung parliament, which I think is a possible option out of this election, that's another question. I think I interviewed John McDonnell for GQ recently, and he was very, very clear that if Labour lose the election, he doesn't see how he and Jeremy Corbyn stay on. But the fact that we're going into an election and even having those sorts of discussions shows to my mind how what we've got at the moment is a country that is basically looking at all of the parties and saying, do you know what, I don't really want any of you.
Okay. And can I also just ask you, just finally, also, the Jewish Chronicle today has an edition, their front page, and it's headlined, "To all our fellow British citizens," that says this front page is addressed not to our usual readers, but to those who would not normally read the Jewish Chronicle, in other words, to non-Jews. And they are asking people to, when they cast their vote, to consider Corbyn's record of failing to tackle anti-Semitism and his anti-Semitism himself, and say when you cast your vote, you act on that. How damaging is that going to be?
Well, I think the anti-Semitism issue, and I know you're talking to Ian Austin, and Ian, I know, feels incredibly strongly about that, and so do I. However, I think whenever I look, as I did last night, and I saw that clown Boris Johnson sort of, lying his way through his launch outside Number 10, and then his sort of after-dinner speech in Birmingham, and I think if that guy is the best that we can have as Prime Minister for the next few years, ultimately we're in one of those elections where I don't think anybody in the country is voting for somebody thinking this is going to be absolutely fantastic. I think they're all flawed. I think there are very few of them that I would put into the sort of real high category of statesman, stateswoman, politician. But people are going to have to make judgments in the round. And, my partner Fiona, she left the Labour Party, and it was partly over Brexit, but it was actually mainly over anti-Semitism. And I think that will be a factor, but ultimately in the end, people are going to have to vote according to what I want to. I actually do want a hung parliament, because I think that's the only way of keeping a people's vote alive. I don't think Labour are likely to get a majority. I really don't think Johnson deserves a majority, and I hope he doesn't get one.
Good morning to you, Ian Austin.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
I'm very well. I mean, probably better than you are this morning, to be honest with you. I mean, I know, I've known you for many, many years when you were just, an aide to Gordon Brown when I was a political editor. You were a Labour man through and through. It was a big wrench for you to leave the Labour Party, and it was all over the failure to tackle anti-Semitism in the party. You yourself, of course, being adopted by Jewish parents. Your decision now to stand down, what has prompted that?
Well, I thought long and hard about this. Look, I joined the Labour Party as a teenager. I was a councillor in my 20s. I worked for the party in my 30s. I became an MP and a minister in my 40s. So this has been my life, And it's been a really tough decision. But in the end, there's a big choice at this election. There's only two people who can be Prime Minister, only two. And the British people are going to have to decide, Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn. And I think Jeremy Corbyn's completely unfit to lead the country. And so it gives me no pleasure of this at all. It's been a really tough decision. But in the end, I think you've got to stand up and you've got to tell the truth and you've got to do what's right. And I think that's why I've decided the choice people have got to make, I think, is to vote for Boris Johnson. I think he always backs Britain's enemies. I don't think he's a patriot. I don't think he loves this country. I think he supported the IRA, people like him and John McDonnell. he describes Hamas and Hezbollah, terrorist organisations, as his friends. When Putin sends hitmen to murder people on the streets of Britain, Corbyn parrots the Kremlin line. I think they, and most shamefully of all, they've allowed a political party with a proud history and a great track record of fighting for racism and standing up for equality to be poisoned with racism against Jewish people. I think it's an absolute disgrace. I really do. And I think for me, it's a fundamental issue. It's a red line. They've had years to deal with it. It's not been dealt with properly, and I think it renders him unfit to lead our country, and that's why I've made this very difficult decision.
Quite a big wrench for someone who's died in the wool, a Labour man for many years, to leave the party independent. It's quite another to basically endorse a vote for the Conservatives. To say that you would rather have Boris Johnson, Conservatives in power, a party that you fought against, and Boris Johnson, man, you'd fought against for many years. Why have you gone so far as to say, not just I don't endorse Jeremy Corbyn? You've done that before. You've spoken in Parliament. Sure. You've made speeches. We've spoken on my show before about that. To actually say that you want people to vote for the Conservatives, to vote for Boris Johnson's party, is that because you fear if there is either a hung Parliament or a possible Jeremy Corbyn, a Labour majority, that we will see him as Prime Minister?
Because if Boris Johnson doesn't get an overall majority, I think Jeremy Corbyn will be number 10. And
even though you're someone who campaigned for Remain, you know that a Brexit.
Well, I voted for Remain.
But a Tory majority, a Boris majority, that will lead to Brexit, and you think that's less important?
Well, look, I think I voted to Remain, but I promised the people of Dudley that I would uphold the result of the referendum. That was in the Labour manifesto the last election. I repeated that to people in Dudley. I respect local people, and I kept my promises. So I voted for Brexit at each point, even though personally I'd voted to Remain in the referendum. But look, I think a Corbyn government would be a disaster for Britain. I think it would be worse, if I'm honest, than a hard Brexit. I think his economic plans would deter investment, put jobs and businesses at risk. I think their plans would damage pension funds and hit people's pensions. So I just think. I think their Brexit policy, by the way, is a complete fantasy. I mean, the idea that Jeremy Corbyn can go and negotiate a better deal so quickly, I think, who takes that seriously? And if you go to the EU and say, I want to negotiate a deal with you, and then I'm going to put it to a referendum, the EU are obviously not going to give you a deal that the British people will vote for, because they want you to stay in. And who's going to campaign for this deal? Half the Labour Party front bench have said that they campaign against their own deal. So so who's going to campaign for it? So it's a complete fantasy. It's not going to. I mean, there's no way that ridiculous policy is going to be able to withstand 5 weeks of scrutiny in an election campaign. And it shows. It's just another example of how, in my view, they're just completely unfit to lead our country.
Many were saying when the Corbynistas took over the party, got control of the leadership of the party, that they were more. It was more about controlling the party rather than getting into power. Of course, they came very close in the 2017 general election. Is the battle though now from the so-called moderates? You're a Brownite, the Blairites, Alistair Cameron. Is the battle for the Labour Party? Is that now lost? Jeremy Corbyn, John and others. They've now have full control of that party.
Look, it's going to take a miracle to rescue the Labour Party from this. It's going to take a miracle. I mean, they've got their lead. This is a different party, right? Different party, different leader, different values, different policies. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is completely outside the mainstream, and the people around him, John McDonnell, completely outside the mainstream of British politics and the mainstream of the Labour Party. They say they're returning the Labour Party to its traditional socialist roots. It's complete garbage. Clement Attlee was the driving force behind that government, was the driving force behind NATO, insisted on an independent nuclear deterrent, and they expelled communists. It is a complete fiction. These people are completely outside the mainstream of the Labour Party. But they've taken it over, right? They've got the leadership. They've got the NEC. Lots of the staff have changed. And the trade unions, which used to be the sort of voice of sanity that rescued the Labour Party, they're supporting this project as well. So, and you look at some of the people they're selecting. Look at this candidate in Coventry South. Look at the things she said, describing the police.
We can't talk about any individual candidates,
okay,
for Ofcom
but look
rules.
Let me just say this. Go and look. I mean, look, there are lots of good, decent people standing for the Labour Party. Lots of lifelong friends of mine, but there are some of the people they're selecting as candidates, as the new candidates.
Just finally, the friends of yours, you say, the people who are standing, who you perhaps would vote for if they were your local Labour candidate, they nevertheless could be part of a Labour majority that could deliver Jeremy Corbyn to number 10.
Yeah.
What would you say to them? Should they be standing
Well, look,
for
I'm
Labour?
really sorry that it's come to this. I mean, there are really good friends of mine, really, really, really good friends of mine who are standing for Labour, and I'm really sorry. I know how.
Do you think they're wrong?
I know. Look, people are going to make their own decisions. I know how.
But do you think they're wrong?
Look.
You do, don't you? I'm getting the impression from your...
Look, I've made my choice, and I'll speak for myself, I'm sorry that I'm doing this to friends of mine. But you've got to tell the truth, Julia, and you've got to stand up, and you've got to do what's right. And if you can't do that on something as fundamental as racism, what are you going to do it on? And I just say this, if you think about politics, I mean, normal people in the House of Commons, mainstream MPs, have got friends in all parties. When it comes to an election, you go out and campaign against them. And if you think about it, I've decided that the Labour Party shouldn't be in power, and it's pretty,
I can hear the emotion in your voice. Ian Austin, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Well, let's move on to something completely different. We'll come back to this, no doubt, a little bit later. We are going to be talking to Liberal Democrat candidate Vera Hobhouse very soon. Right now, let's talk about their bold green plan, they say, to build a brighter future. Of course, green issues have been very much on the agenda this summer, particularly with those Extinction Rebellion protests, 2 sets of them this year. But those activists yesterday actually won a High Court challenge against the police over the ban on protests that brought London to a standstill. And now they are planning to sue the police for false imprisonment. After winning that challenge, up to 400 protesters who were arrested stand to win total compensation of about £1 million in the wake of yesterday's legal ruling. The group had said that activists would be encouraged to use any taxpayer-funded compensation to pay for future protests. Oh, goody. Well, let's talk about this with Sakina Sheikh, who's a climate justice activist from Platform, not from Extinction Rebellion, but very supportive of those protests. Good morning to you, Sakina.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. There'll be a lot of people who will be jolly cross that, it appears that the police aren't allowed to stop these protests after I think they'd been going up some 10 days by the time they finally said enough is enough. But also the fact that it cost, £24 million to police those protests in this year. And now there's going to be £1 million of public money going in compensation to the people who got arrested. A lot of people are going to be really cross about this.
Well, look, thank you for having me on again. And I know that we discussed this a few weeks ago. And the reason why I think this is something to be celebrated is yesterday the court ruled in favour of the protesters having the right to protest. And I think this is what's fundamental. This is a fundamental right. It's protected by a constitution. And we have to at all times respect people's ability to protest, especially when it's on something as important as climate change.
Well, hold on a minute. No, wait a minute. No, it doesn't matter what the subject's about. It could be a protest about teddy bears if it wants to be. That people don't get to decide what they think's important or not. The point is, you have a right to protest. You have a right to peaceful and legal protest. Now, these protests were largely, but not entirely, peaceful, but they weren't legal. Whether they didn't discuss with the police where they were going to be and negotiate routes or timeframes. They just organised those protests with, of course, mass disruption both in the spring and in the autumn. And of course, we saw the reaction of commuters in Canning Town when they frankly had enough. When people were sitting on the top of trains when people were trying to get to work. You do have a right to protest, but you don't have a right to necessarily bring a capital city to a standstill.
I mean, I think you're quite right on the point of if they were protesting about teddy bears, they are just as entitled to protest about that as they are climate change. The reason I mention in particular climate change is because I think they did a fantastic job at highlighting this government's incompetence in terms of their plans around climate change. I mean, we saw a YouGov poll released just this morning that actually people believe in the 2030 target that Labour is setting. This is the climate election, Julia, because this is the most existential crisis we are facing as humanity. And actually this government don't take it seriously. Their interests are wrapped up in the corporate energy companies. And I think it's about time that we unveiled really where their allies and their interests lie.
It's all big business versus ordinary people. But hold on a minute. But the Labour target, again, is different from the Extinction Rebellion target, which is net zero carbon emissions by 2025. Even the Labour target 2030, the Tory target 2050, even the 2030 target is there's not a single, let's be honest, sensible person. This is not a party political matter, but not a single person who thinks that is achievable in the time frame suggested.
Oh, net zero 2030 is completely.
How are you going to achieve it?
I mean, you rapidly have a program of renewable energy building, and
you're going to do that in 10 years.
It's completely possible, Julia. We don't have a choice at this point. Climate change is real, and we've got 11 years before we do irreparable damage to our planet. Or we have to take out all.
But again, can I just point out, by the way, again, you're repeating a claim which supposedly from the last IPCC report, and that's not what they said.
Well, that's exactly what they said. It's the government body says that. But you know what I think is really exciting, especially in the context of the climate election and discussing this, is austerity has stripped northern towns and inner city boroughs, and actually a climate change plan by the Labour Party can see huge public investments that can bridge that inequality gap, that can create new green jobs, that can give us a living wage for all, that we can see public investments not just in our green industrial revolution, but also back into the NHS, so that we don't have a winter crisis.
But coming back to the crucial issue of whether or not an issue is important, and whether or not people want to have more publicity about it, or indeed to persuade political parties. We have a general election right now. People have a chance to vote for, say, the Green Party. We're going to talk to the Liberal Democrats in a few moments about their green policy. People have a chance to vote, to choose between the Labour and the Tory policies and but all the others. Rather than stopping people getting on trains or aeroplanes, or stopping people driving across bridges, shouldn't green activists focus on winning over the public at the ballot box, rather than stopping people going about their law-abiding business?
I think absolutely green activists should be focusing on the vision that Labour has and the vision that a climate industrial revolution can give us. The Tories have failed. Look, even their own ministers don't believe in their ability to lead as a government. We saw them stepping down yesterday as the wheels fell off Boris's election campaign. So you're right, the election should be everyone's focus. And in my opinion, this is the climate election.
Yeah, well, again, a lot of people saying it's the Brexit election. I have a funny feeling the voters are going to make their own minds up about what it's about. But let's turn our attention to the Liberal Democrats. Vera Hobhouse is a candidate for the Liberal Democrats, and they're today setting out what they call their bold green plan to build a brighter future. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Good morning. I would just like to ask you about what big events of the last 24 hours. Of course, we'd had the Welsh Secretary Alan Cairns having to stand down. We've seen Tom Watson, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, standing down. And now we've just been hearing Ian Austin, was an independent former Labour MP, urging Labour voters to vote for Boris Johnson. And it's been an extraordinary 24 hours at the start of a general election campaign. Your thoughts on those developments?
Well, it has been extraordinary. We Liberal Democrats are very positive about our plans. We have a very clear message, which we have said again and again. We think we need to stop Brexit and build a brighter future. And maybe all these controversies and all these people who are jumping from one party to the other or can't stand anymore, all that will be wiped away, because we should get over Brexit by stopping Brexit.
Okay, yes, I do always wonder whether Leave voters will feel that they've got over it if and when it's stopped. But let's talk about your plan for tackling the climate emergency. What are the Liberal Democrats going to set out as their plans today?
So we keep saying we need climate action now, because within 10 years, we really need to transform what we do. And it's difficult, and we need to make sure it's fair and that we are taking people with us. And if we're talking about a Brexit controversy, I think if we don't get this right, we haven't seen anything yet in terms of dividing people if we don't get this right, because we must make sure that those who can least afford it will not have to carry the biggest burdens for it. But we need to change the way we drive around. We need to have completely different cars. So Liberal Democrats will stop the sale of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030.
But hold on a minute. There won't be any new petrol and diesel cars on the market by 2030. All of the major manufacturers have said they're doing that anyway.
That's what they say. But under Conservative plans, the deadline is actually 2040, which is 10 years later. So, we need to bring a lot of things forward because our original targets were geared towards 80% of carbon reduction by 2050. Since last year and since the commitment by government, we have to get to net zero. And these last 20% are actually incredibly crucial and difficult because there's just no room for anything that we do around fossil fuels. So that includes electricity, that includes how we heat our homes. And these are very difficult things to change because look at your home probably is heated by gas, natural gas, that's a fossil fuel. What are we going to do about this? So we need to change a lot of things within a very short period of time.
And how is that feasible? You're setting out ambitious plans. You say you want to you've got 80% target. Is it 80% of energy or 80% of electricity that you want to come from renewables?
And again, I think it is important that people have clarity about what is what.
So which is it?
There's power and heat is two different sectors. So we're talking about power. Now, 80% of power, so what we use as electricity, has to come from renewables. And since we have to increase our electricity grid, if you think we've just been talking about cars, that most cars are hopefully going to be electric, some of them hydrogen, but we think for private vehicles it will be electric cars, then we suddenly have to increase a lot of our electricity supply. So not only do we need to double our electricity, but probably quadruple it, and 80% under our plans should come from renewables, and that then means huge increases in wind and solar and marine power.
Well, OK, but hold on a minute. So, look, again, your press release says 80% of electricity from renewables, and then later on it says 80% of energy from renewables. But you'll know that electricity only makes up about 20% of the energy we use in this country. So if you want, 80% target to come from by 2030 from renewables. I mean, currently it's just 12% of energy is actually from of all of our energy is from renewables. Yeah. How many solar panels and wind turbines and indeed any other forms of renewable energy are you planning to install in that period that will deliver that level of renewable energy?
So again, because it's not very clear. 12% if you look at the overall fossil fuel use, but if you're looking at electricity, 40% is currently actually being generated by renewable energy. So let's be clear about it. So currently about 40% comes from renewable energy, and that includes biofuels and that sort of stuff. But let's look at just the electricity. So we're saying a lot of that needs to come from renewables, and absolutely we need to increase our renewable energy market. So a lot of what we currently do comes from offshore wind. So that's something that people don't see, but we can massively increase that. But there's massive opportunities in marine and tidal power.
And you're going to get all of this done in time for 2030, just 10 years away.
This is why we are talking about the urgency. The thing is, we know what to do. We have a moral duty then to act very quickly. It's not like something like AIDS that came along in the 1970s and we didn't really know what it was. We know what we need to do, so we can do it with big government action, big upfront investment. And yes, government needs to set the parameters, and currently the government is doing relatively little. So under a Lib Dem government, all of that would absolutely accelerate in order to also create the incentives and that sort of thing.
You're also talking, again, quite apart from the billions in terms of actually dealing with creating all of that renewable energy from almost nowhere. And of course, by the way, at some point, you do actually need to fund.
Not nowhere. We know what to do, and these industries exist, and they
exist, but nothing like on the scale that you're talking about. You're also talking about spending 15. Can I ask you a question? Yeah. You're actually talking about spending £15 billion to retrofit 26 million homes in this country to make them more energy efficient. Now, this is something that the Labour Party were talking about yesterday, But 26 million homes is basically all of the homes in this country. How much is that per house?
So, first of all, we are talking mainly about low-income homes. So
26 million homes is basically every home in the country. So how much does £15 billion spread over 26 million homes? How much does that actually work out? Because I've got it as something in the region of about 570 quid a home. That's replacing one window.
So the 26 million actually homes is a Labour plan. What we are saying is we need to put.
No, I've got this in your... This is a press release from the Liberal Democrat press office.
Yes,
the Liberal Democrats have committed to raising the energy efficiency standards for new homes alongside investing £15 billion over the next Parliament to retrofit 26 million homes.
So we need
plan.
to retrofit. Yeah, we need to retrofit homes, and we need to spend a lot of money on this.
I know, but I'm asking you, £15 billion for 26 million homes. How much realistically? What figure do you have per home? I mean, maybe my maths is wrong. I don't know. It might be. My calculator doesn't seem to be able to cope with the concept of a billion.
So it is apart from giving, it is obviously giving homes and homeowners, and we are talking particularly about private landlords who are renting out and social homes. So what we are going to do about people who own their own homes and live in their own homes is creating incentives. It's not giving them directly
so
money.
you're not going to... That's only going to be for poorer people's homes. So you're telling everyone else they're going to have to spend their own money to do this?
Well, and not every detail has been worked out in any plan. But the main thing is that we are concentrating on low income homes, because that's really what we need to do. We've been saying, and I said this at the very beginning.
Hold on a minute. So when the press release says that but what you're saying doesn't tally with what I've got in black and white here from the Liberal Democrats. Not an article, a press release from Liberal Democrats saying that you're going to invest £15 billion to retrofit 26 million homes. What you're saying is you're going to do a couple of million homes, and everyone else is going to have to pay for it themselves.
No, hang on. We are concentrating our efforts on those who actually need it more, and those are low-income homes, and we are also concentrating on fuel poverty. So the main thing is to make sure, and I've said it at the very beginning, those who can least afford it should not carry the burden. So we are concentrating with our efforts on the low-income homes and make sure that people live in warm homes and can go through the transition. Those people who can afford to retrofit, it is for private homeowners to look at how they're meeting the targets themselves. And I think
you say that, but again, the notes to editors on this press release, Vera, says Liberal Democrats aim to upgrade every house in the UK by 2030. I mean, again, you say you're prioritising poorer homes by 2025.
Yes, and I think that's the right thing to do, and wouldn't you?
But I want to know. The £15 billion isn't enough to do that work for every single home. So, but if you're aiming to do that work, is that going to be compulsory? Are homeowners going to be required by law, if the Liberal Democrats are in government, to spend hundreds or possibly thousands on their home to get better insulation?
Currently, we are requiring by law landlords who are.
What about homeowners living in their own homes?
There's currently in our plans nothing to require by law that private homeowners
currently in your plans. Are you looking at changing that?
Well, it's an 80-page plan. Read it carefully. And we have concentrated on particular things. And we are currently concentrating on the low-income homes because that will also make people live in warmer homes. And we are ending fuel poverty. And that was our focus, really.
Vera Hoppas, thank you for joining us. Let's turn our attention now to Conservative candidate Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons as well. Good morning to you, Nigel.
Good morning, Julia.
I was expecting today, when I was speaking to people of various different parties, to be talking about the horrific first 24 hours of the Tory party campaign, when we saw, again, the resignation of a Cabinet Minister, Alan Cairns, unprecedented in an election campaign. Jacob Rees-Mogg, another Cabinet Minister, he was under fire and had to apologise for people's claims. I don't believe he did, but he'd insulted Grenfell survivors. Then Andrew Bridgen went on radio to defend him, and then he had to apologise for his apology in defence of Rees-Mogg. We had accusations that the Keir Starmer, Brexit Secretary, a video of him on television had been doctored by the Labour Party to make it look like he hadn't answered a question when he had. We've got Dominic Grieve, former Tory MP, now independent, saying that the government is burying a report from his committee into Russian interference into elections, into the last election and the last referendum. Absolutely horrific 24 hours. Then we had the Boris Johnson launch, all looking like it was going well. And then the Labour Party said, hold my beer. And we had the Tom Watson resignation. And, of course, we've seen what Ian Austin has had to say today as well. To a certain extent, your Tory campaign has been rescued by Tom Watson, hasn't it?
Well, I think they're calling it the dead cat bounce. It's going to be a roller coaster of a campaign, Julia. This is my 11th parliamentary election. And I've never seen a start just like this. Of course, the one thing you've missed off as well is Joe Swinson having to defend one of the leaflets whereby they try and pretend that they're quoting Sky News and The Guardian, when in effect they're actually quoting Joe Swinson's own words. So I just think the next, of course, the general election is going to be 5 weeks today. And I think that fairly well, we're hearing predictions that more former Labour MPs are going to announce that they are not going to stand at the next election. I listened to Ian Austin this morning and the interview. It's a very moving interview that he gave. And then you're interviewing the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. I've just read the front page of that, and it's chilling. So this is going to be, I think, quite a brutal election campaign. I'm in the northwest of England. I'm back in the Ribble Valley, and we've got a few target seats here.
Yeah, let's not talk about any individual seats. Obviously, various candidates standing in all those different seats.
But there'll be a number of seats, clearly, that we'll be targeting. And the message is going to be quite stark. It is that who goes through number 10, the door at number 10, it's either going to be Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn. And clearly, when you've got people like Ian Austin saying, for goodness sake, make sure it is not that man. This is a former Labour minister, a man who's been a Labour MP for over a decade and indeed been a member of the Labour Party all his life. And this is quite incredible when you've got at the very start of an election campaign, people like Ian Austin coming out and saying these things.
Well, indeed, and very, very damaging for the Labour Party. And we know there's been no love lost between either Ian Austin or indeed Tom Watson and Jeremy Corbyn. There's now the campaigning by the Tory party at the last general election, led by, of course, Theresa May, did narrowly win it, but of course lost the majority. Was very much focused on that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't a suitable person to be Prime Minister. Very much focused on his support for Hamas, Hezbollah, the IRA. This was mentioned again and again. And it was quite clear that did not have much traction with a lot of voters. A lot of younger people going, well, I don't remember the IRA. People don't follow, who the international terrorist organisations are like Hamas and Hezbollah. And a lot of that was just ignored by the fact people were saying, well, we're looking at what's happening in this country and how much money is going to be spent in terms of the public services versus Tory austerity. So although this is very damaging to Jeremy Corbyn, what Tom Watson, his decision and what Ian Austin's had to say, will it have much cut through for ordinary voters, and particularly floating voters who, as we know, are the people who end up in key constituencies deciding the outcome of elections?
No, you're quite right. Whilst it was hammered at the last election, it didn't seem to have much traction with younger people. And if we just concentrate on that, then I think we'll be making a big mistake. But I think it is right to point that out. But it's far more important, quite frankly, to point out that the Labour Party want to borrow £600 billion to spend on renationalisation and expenditure right, left and centre, which will be, as the Institute of Fiscal Studies have pointed out today, quite a significant amount of money to borrow. And where's that money going to come from? And, we've already got some members of the Labour Party saying that they don't like billionaires staying in this country when they know that the top 1% of wealth earners in this country contribute 27% of our taxes. And so I would far more like to focus on those sorts of things, Julia, than to focus on the IRA and Hamas and Hezbollah. I mean, as the Jewish Chronicle has pointed out, that he did call Hamas his friends, despite the fact that they are, despite their attitude towards Jewish people throughout the world.
But again, this was for Boris Johnson. It was very much like the Brexit election. All of your campaigning is about, get Brexit done so we can get on to other things. But the spending taps have been turned on. Quite a lot of criticism from some in the party that the Tory party, turning on their own magic money tree for a lot of this spending, having criticised the Labour Party for similar levels of spending promises in the 2017 election. The Labour Party clearly want to make this about the NHS, about anything but Brexit, because of a rather confused, I think everyone would agree, not a party political point, but a confused Brexit policy. It does look like the topic has already moved on from Brexit. Already we're talking about, say, Jeremy Corbyn's fitness for office. Already we're talking about, the competition over public services. We were talking earlier in the show about, the green energy, the climate. We're talking about the NHS, risks of an NHS crisis. Has this actually been a bit too big of a risk, a bit too big of a gamble by your party leader, wanting a general election? He was the only one who really wanted this general election, when actually you can't control events, dear boy, events.
So, you never can. General elections always are an animal of their own creation during the period. So you're absolutely right about that. But in the Northern Heartlands, where I am, and in Lancashire, where every constituency voted Leave, there is huge anger out there. And Jeremy Corbyn can try and gloss it over with whatever the policy happens to be today. I mean, we all know that the vast majority of the Labour leadership want to renegotiate with the European Union, put that question then to the British people with a rigged franchise with votes for 16 and 17-year-olds and EU nationals. These are people who did not vote at the last referendum. And then the Labour Party are going to campaign for Remain. I mean, it is quite a remarkable policy that they are fighting on. And so I think that will resonate with the public. But no, they are interested in the National Health Service and all the other issues on public expenditure, Julia. But we need to get Brexit sorted in order to ensure that what we expect, which is huge investment in the United Kingdom, which is being held up by the indecision of Parliament. And I don't think Boris had a choice about the timing of the general election. Parliament was absolutely sclerotic. It was preventing us getting on from what both the Labour Party and the Tories promised in 2017, which was to deliver Brexit. And the Conservative Party now is the only party at this general election which is going into it with a policy of leaving the European Union with a deal that the EU have accepted.
Let's talk to Alex Phillips, who's an MEP for the Brexit Party for the south east of England. Good morning to you, Alex.
Good morning.
Good morning. Of course, a lot of focus on the Brexit Party at the end of last week and over the weekend after Nigel Farage, your party leader, said that, basically, unless there was a deal with the Conservatives and Boris Johnson, unless he agreed to basically rip up his own Brexit deal, that Nigel Farage was going to stand 600 candidates across the Great Britain up against Tory candidates, could, of course, risk splitting the Leave vote. We have seen, though, that actually support for Brexit Party is going down. We've seen even some of the candidates standing for the Brexit Party at the general election. 20 candidates now have said they're standing aside and they'll support the Tory candidate and the Boris Johnson Brexit plan. Are you worried you're not going to have very many of those 600 candidates left at this rate?
No, not at all, because I was at our candidate event on Monday in London, and we were a very concretised bloc, and there was a whole lot of enthusiasm from hundreds of people in that room. And I agree, we're facing a political existential crisis here, which goes across the political spectrum. So there will be people who have before been members of the Conservative Party or supporters of the Conservative Party, moved to the Brexit Party and wanted to back us, who might have had their arms heavily twisted by the Conservative Party. But you put a few PPCs who might be stepping aside, and we will find their replacements into context of what we're going to put as a full slate of candidates across the country. And it's actually minimal compared to the number of big beasts that are actually being hemorrhaged from the establishment parties at the moment.
The thing is, an awful lot of quite prominent people in the Brexit Party and supporters of Brexit who aren't sort of tied to the Conservative Party who are coming out for the Boris Johnson deal, saying it's not ideal, they'd probably be quite happy with no deal or quite happy with just a simple free trade agreement, which of course is what Nigel Farage wants, but perfectly happy with it. Lance Foreman, a fellow Brexit Party MEP, has been on my show, quite happy with it. John Longworth from the Leave campaign, Martin Howe QC from Lawyers for Leave, people who are very prominent, business people and lawyers who genuinely feel like they would be willing to sign up to the Boris Johnson deal, and yet Nigel Farage isn't. There's this idea now, especially with the Remain Alliance, Liberal Democrats doing deals with the Plaid and Green Party, looking like some 70 seats, key seats for them, that we could end up seeing an alliance for Remain voters and the Leave vote being split. We already know that projected turnout is going to be higher for Remainers on how many people say they're going to vote than for Leavers. There is a real risk that your party and your party leader could end up being the reason why we get a hung parliament and that Brexit isn't delivered for those 17.4 million Leave voters from 2016.
There's a whole lot of things in there that I need to address. So first of all, let's go with Martin Howe QC. The Telegraph very much abridged what he was saying in his analysis.
No, I spoke to him on my show.
Okay, look, I'm talking about what the Telegraph reported.
Okay, I didn't mention the Telegraph article.
Can I just address that point? Because there's other things you brought up that I want to also address. Martin Howe pointed out there were very grave concerns with that withdrawal agreement. And what I would say to you is this. Look, Martin Howe isn't standing for office. I respect him enormously, and he's been a grand asset to the Brexit cause. But I wouldn't buy a car with grave concerns, because it'd probably crash off the side of the motorway.
Okay, no,
Let
but
alone
it's about the
5
choices available, not having your ideal car. Again, we haven't. Look, Alex, I'm so sorry. We don't physically have time to sort of go through every single individual aspect. I'm just saying to you, there are people like John Longworth. He lost his job to be a Leave campaigner. Lance Foreman is an elected MEP.
Because I
They
think I'm the
disagree
person
with
who's
you.
supposed to be talking about representing my party at the moment. Lance Foreman indeed has always had close connections with Boris Johnson. He might be acting in a bit of a maverick fashion at the moment. The rest of us as MEPs do not endorse his comments at all. That is very clear internally. As for John Longworth, much the same. You're looking at two individuals of a party which actually has hundreds of PPCs, thousands of volunteers. And actually, if you look at the dissent and the divisions in the other parties, look at the Conservative Party. You have an inner core of people in the ERG who I'd call true Brexiteers. That probably amounts to, at most, a quarter of the party, which means 3/4 of the Conservative Party are for a soft Brexit. A huge chunk are still for Remain. The Labour Party have no clear position. Like I said, the difficulty at the moment is politically we're living in very interesting existential times where political affiliations go from left to right, they go from party to party, they also go from Leave to Remain. And it's something that all political parties are having to cope with and move forward and try and concretise over. And I would say, out of all of the parties, the Brexit Party has the most clear position.
No, there's no doubt at all it's a clear position. I wasn't disputing that. Alex, I simply was saying, given that the Brexit Party, where they are in the polls and where the Tories are in the polls, there'll be many Leave voters who'll be fearful when the Remain parties are working together, there'll be some alliance there, that actually the Brexit Party could end up delivering a split Leave vote, cutting the number of seats for the Conservative Party. It was the only party that could viably deliver Brexit at this current time of any version of it, and stopping Brexit from happening. That I wanted to tackle that specific issue.
Okay, I will do. I'm no sophologist, but look, we as a party actually take votes from the Labour Party as well as the Conservative Party, so you have to look at this on a constituency by constituency basis. We made a very clear offer to the Conservative Party saying, look, these are very interesting times we live in. This is an election called in the context of this Brexit crisis, if you will, and the logjam in Parliament. So actually, let's put party first to one side and say, let's unite and make this work. We've offered a Leave alliance, and they're the ones not accepting it. And in many respects, therefore, when it comes to things like constituencies in the northeast of England, the Labour heartlands in Wales, it's the Conservative Party who split the Brexit vote because they have no chance of winning those seats. We put forward, I think, a very sensible, honourable offer to deliver the best for the United Kingdom and actually deliver on that referendum result.
Alex, we'll have to leave it there.